There's always one person in the room who says the least. While everyone is talking, they're watching. They notice the small change in someone's voice, the uncomfortable pause before an answer, the smile that looks normal but feels forced, the person who suddenly becomes quieter than usual. Most people never notice these things, but somehow this person does. And because they are quiet, people often make the wrong assumption. They think they are shy, they are not interested, they don't have anything to say. But what if the opposite is true? What if silence is not a sign that someone is disconnected? What if silence is the reason they are noticing more? Because while everyone else is busy trying to be heard, the quiet person is often busy collecting information. They're watching, processing, connecting patterns, and sometimes they understand what is happening in a room before anyone else realizes it. The interesting part is that this is not some mysterious superpower. It is connected to the way attention, personality, and the brain work together. Your brain has limited resources. At any moment, thousands of things are happening around you. People are speaking, facial expressions are changing, voices are rising and falling, body language is sending signals. Your brain cannot process everything equally, so it chooses what to focus on. And this is where quiet people often behave differently. While some people naturally focus more on participating, quiet people often spend more mental energy observing. They are not outside the conversation, they're studying it. Think about a group discussion. One person is telling a story, everyone is laughing. Most people are focused on the words being said, but the quiet person may notice something else. They notice that one person laughed slightly later than everyone else. They notice someone avoiding eye contact. They notice a change in energy when a certain topic appears. These details seem small, but human communication is built from small details. A single facial expression, a tiny change in tone, a short pause. The brain uses these signals to understand what people really mean, and people who spend more time observing often become better at detecting them. But why? Why do some people naturally observe more than others? The answer begins with attention. Attention is like a spotlight inside your mind. Where you point that spotlight determines what information enters your awareness. Imagine walking through a crowded street. One person notices the shops, another notices people's clothing, another notices sounds, another notices emotions on people's faces. Everyone is experiencing the same environment, but their brains are selecting different information. Quiet people often direct more attention toward the environment and the people around them. Instead of constantly preparing their next response, they may spend more time processing what is already happening. This creates a different experience. While someone else is thinking, what should I say next? The quiet person may be thinking, why did they react that way? What changed in this conversation? Does something feel different here? This does not mean every quiet person is automatically more intelligent or more perceptive. Human personality is much more complex than that. But research on personality and attention suggests that people differ in how they interact with the world. Some people gain energy from external stimulation, conversation, groups, new experiences. Others spend more time reflecting internally and processing information, and that difference can influence what they notice. The quiet person is not necessarily seeing more because they have better eyes. They may be seeing more because their attention is placed differently. And attention determines reality, because the things you ignore might as well not exist. A person can sit in the same room as you and experience a completely different world. One person remembers the conversation, another remembers the emotion, another remembers the tiny details everyone else missed. The quiet observer often lives in that third category. They collect small pieces of information, then their brain starts connecting them. And this ability to connect small details is where something fascinating happens, because noticing things is only the first step. The real power comes from understanding what those details mean. And that is where quiet people often surprise others. The human brain is constantly trying to predict what will happen next. Every conversation, every interaction, every social situation. Your brain is not just listening to words, it is constantly asking, what does this person really mean? How do they actually feel? Is something changing? This ability is called social perception. It is the brain's ability to understand other people by using information from their behavior, their words, their expressions, their tone, their movements. And this is where quiet people often develop an interesting advantage. Because when you talk less, you often have more mental space to observe. Imagine two people in a conversation. Person A is focused on telling their story. They are thinking about their words, their next point, how others are reacting to them. Person B is listening. They are noticing the story, but also the emotion behind it. They notice that the person says, "I'm fine," but their voice sounds different. They notice that someone laughs, but their eyes do not show happiness. They notice that a confident person suddenly becomes uncomfortable when a certain topic appears. These observations happen because attention is not being used only for speaking, it is being used for gathering information. A quiet person may not immediately respond because their brain is still processing, and sometimes that processing creates a deeper understanding of the situation. Think about detectives. A detective is not successful because they see everything. They're successful because they notice what others ignore. A small detail, a missing piece, a change in a pattern. Human behavior works the same way. People reveal information constantly, not only through what they say, but through what they avoid saying. A person who suddenly becomes quieter, someone who changes their usual behavior, someone who gives a different answer than expected. These small changes can reveal important information. The brain is extremely good at detecting patterns. It evolved this way because recognizing patterns helped humans survive. Our ancestors needed to notice, was that sound dangerous? Is this person trustworthy? Has something changed in the environment? The brain became a pattern detection machine, and some people naturally spend more time analyzing patterns in people and situations. This can create the feeling that quiet people notice everything. They are not reading minds, they are reading patterns. A single action might mean nothing, but repeated patterns tell a story. Someone avoiding a conversation once may mean nothing. Someone avoiding the same topic every time may reveal something deeper. Someone being quiet one day may simply be tired, but a consistent change in behavior can be meaningful. Quiet observers often collect these small pieces without immediately reacting. They allow information to accumulate, then they form a conclusion. This is different from making instant judgments, and that difference matters. Many social interactions happen quickly. People react before they fully understand. They hear one sentence and immediately create an opinion. They see one action and assume they know the reason. But quiet observers often delay the conclusion. They gather more information first. This can lead to better understanding. However, there is an important distinction. Being quiet does not automatically mean someone is observant, and being talkative does not mean someone is unaware. There are highly observant people who are very social, and there are quiet people who are simply quiet. Personality is not a simple label. The interesting part is the behavior. People who spend more time observing often train their brain to become better at observation. Just like a musician becomes better at hearing small differences in sound, or an artist becomes better at seeing small differences in shape and color, someone who constantly observes people can become better at noticing human behavior. The brain improves what you repeatedly practice. This is one of the most fascinating things about human psychology. Your attention shapes your abilities. Whatever you repeatedly focus on becomes easier for your brain to detect. A person who spends years studying emotions may notice emotional changes faster. A person who studies body language may notice physical signals faster. A person who spends more time watching social interactions may become better at understanding them. The quiet observer is often practicing something without realizing it. They are practicing awareness, but this ability comes with another side. Because when your brain becomes highly sensitive to information, it does not only notice positive things, it notices problems too. It notices tension, it notices uncertainty, it notices things that other people can ignore, and sometimes seeing more can become exhausting. Because the same ability that helps quiet people understand the world can also make their own world feel more complicated. A brain that notices everything may struggle to turn itself off. And this is where we discover the hidden downside of being highly observant. Because noticing more does not always mean feeling better. Sometimes it means carrying more information than everyone else. The ability to notice more can feel like a gift, but every gift has a cost. When your brain becomes highly focused on details, it does not only notice the things you want to see, it notices everything. The positive signals, the negative signals, the things that are obvious, and the things that most people completely miss. This is why some quiet people describe feeling like they are constantly observing the world around them. They enter a room and immediately sense the atmosphere. They notice when someone's energy feels different. They recognize tension before anyone says anything. They can tell when a friendship feels slightly different. But there is a hidden problem. A brain that is good at finding patterns can sometimes find patterns everywhere. And this is where observation can turn into overthinking. Imagine someone sends you a short message. Okay. A normal response might be, they are busy. But an overactive observing mind may start asking, are they upset? Did I say something wrong? Does this mean something? The ability to analyze can become a loop. The brain takes a small piece of information and starts building possibilities. This happens because the brain hates uncertainty. Your mind is constantly trying to create a complete picture. When information is missing, the brain tries to fill the gaps. Sometimes it fills them correctly. Sometimes it creates a story that is not actually true. This is one reason highly observant people may struggle with overthinking. They notice the clue, but they may spend too much time trying to understand what the clue means. The same skill that helps someone understand people can also make them mentally exhausted because the brain is always processing, always scanning, always interpreting. Think about a security system. A security system that never detects anything is useless, but a security system that detects every tiny movement becomes exhausting. The goal is not to stop noticing. The goal is learning when to pay attention and when to let things go. This balance is important because observation without emotional control can become anxiety, but observation combined with self-awareness can become wisdom. Many quiet people develop strong emotional awareness because they spend a lot of time reflecting. They ask questions like, why did that person react that way? Why did that conversation feel uncomfortable? Why did I feel different in that situation? Reflection allows the brain to learn from experiences. It turns ordinary moments into lessons. A person who constantly reflects may become better at understanding themselves and others. This is why some quiet people appear unusually mature, not because they have experienced everything, but because they spend more time processing what they experience. There's a difference between living through an event and learning from it. Two people can experience the same conversation. One person moves on immediately, the other thinks about it later. What happened there? What did I learn? What could I have done differently? That extra processing can create deeper understanding. Psychologists often study this through the concept of self-reflection. Self-reflection is the ability to examine your own thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It allows people to recognize patterns in themselves. Why do I react this way? Why does this situation affect me? What habits keep repeating? This internal observation can be extremely valuable because before you understand other people, you need to understand yourself. But there is another reason quiet people may appear highly observant. They often listen differently. Listening is not just waiting for your turn to speak. Real listening requires attention. When someone is speaking, many people are already preparing their own response. They are thinking, what should I say next? How can I explain my opinion? How can I make my point? But deep listening requires something different. It requires being present. The listener is not trying to control the conversation, they're trying to understand it. And because of this, quiet people can sometimes make others feel deeply understood. Someone might say, I don't know why, but I feel like you understand me. The reason may not be magic, it may simply be attention. In a world where everyone is fighting to be heard, someone who truly listens becomes rare, and rarity creates value. But this also explains why quiet people are sometimes misunderstood, because society often rewards visible behavior. The person speaking the most appears confident, the person sharing the most appears engaged. The person dominating the conversation appears influential, but visibility is not the same as awareness. A person can be silent and still be deeply engaged. A person can be quiet and still have thousands of thoughts happening internally. The outside world only sees behavior. It does not see the mental activity behind it. This creates one of the biggest misconceptions about quiet people. People confuse silence with emptiness, but silence can contain a huge amount of information processing. A quiet person may not be absent from the moment. They may be experiencing it more deeply. However, there's one more important question. If quiet people notice so much, why don't they always say something? Why do they sometimes stay silent even when they understand what is happening? The answer reveals another hidden part of psychology, because noticing something and choosing to reveal it are two completely different processes. Noticing something and expressing something are two completely different abilities. A person can understand a situation deeply and still choose not to speak. This is something many people misunderstand about quiet individuals. They assume, if they noticed it, why didn't they say anything? But communication is not only about having information, it is also about timing, context, purpose. A quiet person may think, is saying this helpful? Will this change anything? Is this the right moment? While some people naturally process their thoughts out loud, others process internally first. They want to organize the information before releasing it. Their silence is not always uncertainty. Sometimes it is evaluation. The brain is deciding, is this worth saying? This is why quiet people can sometimes surprise others. They may remain silent through an entire conversation, then suddenly say one sentence that changes the entire discussion, not because they weren't paying attention, because they were paying attention the entire time. They were collecting information, connecting ideas, waiting until their thoughts were complete. In psychology, this difference is often connected to how people process information. Some people have a more external processing style. They discover their thoughts while talking. Conversation helps them think. Others have a more internal processing style. They think first, then speak. Neither style is better. They are simply different ways the brain organizes information. But in a world that rewards constant communication, internal processing can sometimes be misunderstood. Silence is often interpreted as weakness. But throughout history, many powerful decisions came from people who spent more time observing than reacting. Before making a move, they studied. Before speaking, they listened. Before acting, they understood. Because observation creates something valuable: perspective. When you're constantly reacting, you only see what is happening in front of you. When you slow down and observe, you start seeing why it is happening. And understanding the why changes everything. This is the hidden strength of quiet observation. It allows people to see patterns before they become obvious. So, if you are someone who has always been called quiet, remember this: your silence does not mean you are invisible. Your quietness does not mean you have nothing to contribute. The way you observe the world is a skill. But like every skill, it needs balance. Do not let observation become endless overthinking. Do not let awareness become constant worry. The goal is not to notice everything. The goal is to notice what matters, because your attention is one of the most powerful resources you have. Whatever you repeatedly focus on, your brain becomes better at finding. Focus on problems, and your brain finds more problems. Focus on possibilities, and your brain finds opportunities. Focus on understanding people, and your brain becomes better at reading human behavior. Your mind is always learning what deserves attention. The question is, what are you teaching it to notice? At MindVault, we explore the hidden psychology behind the thoughts, behaviors, and patterns that shape human life. Because the more you understand the mind, the better you understand yourself. So the next time you see a quiet person sitting silently in a room, do not assume they are disconnected. They might be noticing the things everyone else is missing. They might be listening to what is not being said. They might be understanding a story that has not been spoken yet. Because sometimes silence is not the absence of thought. Sometimes silence is where the deepest thinking happens.